Hi, we're continuing with the series I'm doing targeting parents who have borderline children, children who are adolescents or young adults or even older. We've been doing a number of videos. I also have a book, as I've noted, called Borderline Personality Disorder: From Chaos to Authenticity. Um, what I'd like to talk about today is something um, very strategic, and that is very often with borderlines, and particularly with borderline children. And these children in adolescence are having social changes in their lives, academic changes in their lives. They are having all sorts of things happening to them above and beyond what you normally see with adults. The children are trying to fit in, they're trying to be um, a part of their family, they're trying to understand their own identity in terms of their sexuality, gender, and so on. And regular children could be difficult, and these children could be hell on wheels. They can throw temper tantrums and so on. The question is, how do you approach these children? And what I'd like to suggest is be very careful in trying to attach yourself to the child, um, placating their needs. And I want to give you this uh, example from The Horse Whisperer. It's a great book, a great movie. And there's a scene where the horse trainer has a very difficult horse who becomes spooked and very frightened um, because someone who's unfamiliar and insensitive to the horse approaches the horse, and the horse runs off into this field. And as you're reading this, you think, well, the horse trainer, of course, will go to the horse and bring the horse back and continue with the training. And the horse trainer, the horse whisperer, goes to the field where the horse is and just sits there. They're about, I don't know, maybe 40, 50 feet apart, maybe more. And the trainer waits and waits. And I don't mean he waits for a few minutes. He waits hours and hours, and he doesn't move. He just enjoys the day he's in this beautiful field. Eventually, the horse calms down. It takes a long time. He's eating a little bit in the field. He's looking around the horse. And eventually, he walks. And he walks here, he walks there. Eventually, he walks over to the trainer. The horse, of his own volition, has come to the trainer so he feels calm and trusting. And then the trainer escorts the horse back to the training area on the farmland. Allow your child to come to you. I know it's very anxiety provoking because you're worried about the child's well-being and health and psychological and emotional stability. You're worried that your child is not getting enough sleep and eating properly. You're worried about their impulsive behaviors with regard to sex and everything, the drugs. And worst of all, this is all informed by your child's anger and rage and anxiety and so on. And so you want very much to help your child. You love your child, right? Allow your child to come to you. Be there for your child. Allow the borderline to know that you are there. You will always love the child. You may not be speaking to that child for a few hours or even a day or two because the child has done something very wrong or has been very difficult or verbally or perhaps emotionally abusive towards you or perhaps a sibling in the family. But the child will understand that you are a constant presence. And the constancy for the borderline is really, really important because it gives them a sense of reassurance, non-judgmental love, and the belief that week after week, month after month, year after year, that parent is going to be here for me. As an aside, this becomes clearly much more complicated when the borderline child becomes a young adult and an older adult in 30s and 40s. And, it's a real issue with any child who is disabled or has a disorder, medical or otherwise, to what degree the parent can assist And at some point, one would imagine that the parent cannot assist anymore. When the parent becomes elderly or fragile, or perhaps the parent moves away, or there's another issue in the parent's life, that the parent simply cannot provide for the child. But at this point, the child needs constancy. There's an idea in psychodynamics called object constancy, which means that when the child looks away and the child doesn't see you, or the child doesn't emotionally interact with you, or the child doesn't make eye contact with you, the child in the back of his mind still knows that you are available and that you're going to be present, and that at the end of the day you're helping with basic stuff in the house, and that you're supportive, and that you love that individual. So that's a very, very important idea. Don't approach the child based on this constant fear that that child needs reinforcement. And also don't approach that child based on your own anxiety, based on your own inner uneasiness and fear, because the child will pick up on it, and the child will connect you approaching the child because of your anxiety. The best way to approach a child is when you're calm, is when you're feeling okay, and when you're not angry. Because of course, with all these problems with the borderline child, the parent becomes angry and, sometimes even aggressive and unstable or insecure. It's important to approach the child when you're feeling calm and secure and stable and safe. But it's equally important, and the point I'm making here, is to allow the child to know that you're there and approach the child only in appropriate situations. And the best scenario really is to have the child become calm and feel safe and approach you. And I don't mean approach you with, the borderline child says, I need hugs and kisses. Sometimes the borderline child will just come to you after a few hours of being very angry and say, hi, I'm sorry, or, I had that outburst, I had a really bad day, and I apologize. Related to this, and this is something we spoke about earlier, is that the child with borderline personality disorder will not have necessarily normal developmental milestones, particularly in adolescence and even young adulthood. So, for example, we expect young children to throw temper tantrums. Temper tantrums are terrible, and it's like a hurricane going off in your living room. Every parent has seen a child throw a temper tantrum, and it's unpleasant, it's a little bit scary, but it's not unexpected, and after a few minutes the child calms down. And in some ways it's developmentally quite appropriate. When your borderline child at age 15, 16, 17, 18 is still throwing temper tantrums, it's obviously not developmentally appropriate. And we need to appreciate and remind ourselves that the child, the adolescent, even the young adult with BPD, is not developing as he or she should. In fact, one of the models I have to understand borderline personality disorder in my book, and maybe we'll go over it in a subsequent video, but I have it in my other videos that has a complete outline of the book, is that one of the models is that it's what's called sometimes developmental psychopathology, that the person is not developing by age and by stage that you would normally see with other children at a similar stage or a similar age of development. And because of that, we need to have and expect different kinds of stages for the child. So you may have a borderline child, for example, that has a lot of friends who are doing quite well in college or after college, maybe in graduate school, and your child needs more time. They need another year or two to get themselves together. Perhaps they need another year or two because they had difficulty in college because they were involved in unhealthy activities. They need another year or two to make up academic courses, perhaps. Perhaps they need another year or two because during their adolescence or young adulthood, they were admitted to an inpatient unit for a rehab for drugs, or a psychiatric unit to contend with mental health issues, and that maybe lost them a few months or maybe half a year or a year, so they need more time. We want to be very cognizant that the adolescent with borderline personality disorder will not be developing in quite the same way as other adolescents in the same peer group, in the same class, in the same community. And because of that, we want to be quite non-critical when we see, for example, the borderline adolescent's brother and sister progressing in a normal manner. And it can be difficult for the borderline adolescent seeing the brother and sister and perhaps friends and peers advance in a normal manner through normal stages. You may also see, besides temper tantrums, separation anxiety disorder issues for the borderline child, where the borderline child may want to sleep in mommy and daddy's bed, even though the borderline child is an adolescent or young adult, where the borderline child says, I don't want to go to school in the morning because I have a tummy ache. Well, that's something you kind of expect more with young children who are 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. You may see with borderline children who have separation anxiety, acute fears that something will happen to the parent or caregiver, or that they will be harmed or permanently removed, even though there's no reason to believe that at all. This is all part and parcel of understanding that the borderline child may not have the same or normal developmental milestones of similar children of a similar age in a similar community. And when they become extremely frustrated and angry about this, and they have difficulty, it's important to understand and empathize, but also to allow them to come to you. Allow them to calm down and feel safe and secure and have a better sense of stability in that hour or that day or even that week, and allow them to come to you. So like the horse whisperer, when the child does come to you, you can both interact at that moment in a way that emerges from both of you feeling better and safe. The last thing I'd say about this is that similarly with punishments, and again, this is from the animal behavioral world, and this is true for children in general. Rewards given to children should be modest. When a child does something good, you don't buy them a car. I suppose you could if you're really rich, but when a child does something good, you provide them a moderate reward. And when a child does something bad, you provide them a moderate punishment. When a child does something bad, you don't, take away their phone for a month, assuming they should be on a phone, and you don't ground them for 3 weeks. You ground the child for a night. You take away the phone for a night. In other words, moderate punishments and moderate rewards. This is similarly true for borderlines. Borderlines themselves, because of their dynamic makeup, go to extremes in thinking and emotions and behaviors. And you don't want to match that. You don't want to go to extremes yourself when interacting or contending with the problems of the borderline child. You want to maintain a sense of evenness, of stability. You want to maintain and mirror or be an example for the child in a way that the child understands that when something happens, the normal reaction is not one of extremes or catastrophizing, but rather the normal reaction is to say, I'm a little disappointed that you did this. Why don't you take an hour, go into your room and just kind of think about it, cool off for a while. Something more simple, something that's not based in anger and disappointment and extreme, but rather something that is moderate and allows the child to understand that you may be disappointed, but the borderline child also understands that the unconditional love is there, and it allows the child to calm down and consider what has occurred so that the borderline child doesn't feel even more anger and sometimes self-disappointment. And then when the borderline child does calm down, full circle, the child will come out of his or her room, talk to you. You won't be angry. There wasn't a extreme punishment, and speak in a way as if nothing terrible had happened. This models, this serves as a paradigm for the borderline child to understand proper action and proper reaction, and proper reaction again the other way. And it's a ping pong ball, right? I mean, we interact and interact. It's not a single moment of dynamic communication. So these are some ideas about how to contend with the borderline child when there are acute problems such as anxiety because of separation or temper tantrums or whatnot. Moderate punishments when the child is away. Allow the child to calm down and approach you. Don't be overly anxious. Don't approach the child because of your own inner anxiety. If you need to approach the child, do so with consideration for the developmental needs of that child and what has happened. Thank you.